Hi, this is Don McAllister, and welcome to another edition of Screencasts Online. Well, it must be update season, as this week we take a look at another release of one of my favourite applications, and that's ScreenFlow. Now, ScreenFlow is a video capture and editing application that's optimised for creating screencasts, just like the one you're watching now. However, you can use ScreenFlow as a standard linear video editor using footage shot from your iPhone, your iPad, or just your standard camcorder. So if you prefer to use a standard timeline-based video editor, ScreenFlow is a great alternative to iMovie and Final Cut Pro for standard video projects. We have covered the basics of ScreenFlow extensively with a 5-part series on ScreenFlow 5 and a follow-up show when ScreenFlow 6 was released. Now, these older shows are still extremely relevant, so rather than start again from scratch, I'll just be looking at the new features in ScreenFlow 7.